right, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Enough to Keep Going podcast here on the E2KG network. This is episode 217. 217. Wow, Swiss. This is our deep dive episode. So here on the E2KG network, we come at you every other week with a deep dive into the news and industry analysis, things that have been going on over the last 2 weeks. And in those other weeks, we have our GX show, our game experience show, or what we've been playing, our playlist show, a chance for us to not only talk about the new games, the backlog games, but also, because we are grown-ups who game, that this is also a chance for us to give ourselves an assignment, a little bit of homework, and talk about that. But we'll come back to that at the end of this episode because next week is our GX show. But for tonight, it is our deep dive. We've got some news and a variety of updates. So we've got a lot of news topics to kind of jump through here. And joining me to do that is SwissGuard. Swiss, how are you tonight?
Doing pretty well. So we were talking pre-show, saw the new Dune movie, which was great. And but yeah, episode 217, we're like Cal Ripken, just like grinding it out.
Just churning it along.
Yep.
Yep. Wow, that's a nice callback to the 1998 maybe, when he was in his Iron Man stage.
Yeah, I mean definitely late 90s. It had to be the early 2000s when he actually like set that
Yeah, I
that
think I
game
think
out.
it was like 2000 some. Yep, it was early 2000s when he hit that. So, all right, for all you O's fans out there, congratulations on making it through another season and with a very small payroll as well. So, anyhow, moving on to video games. So, tonight, talk about small production runs. So, we get the information and the update about that the Switch OLED is going to be cutting production by 20% due to supply shortages. So, it's been reported on multiple sites that Nintendo is lowering its manufacturer expectations from 30 million systems to 24 million systems. And so it is not just simply the OLED model, which you already know is in short supply, but it's all of the existing Switch models. So it is still that kind of knock-on effect of the semiconductor shortages that we've seen over the course of COVID and kind of the recovery period. But yeah, this is so this is news. One, a reduction from 30 to 24 million for the biggest selling system of this generation, or of the bridge between generations, depending on how you consider the Swiss, depending on Swiss, how you consider the Switch. There we go. Woo! Too many SWs in that sentence. So, but I think the piece that stays with me about this, Swiss, is by the time that production ramps back up, we're going to be over 5 years. And we already know that the Switch is kind of hardware constrained in terms of technology and processor constrained in terms of frame rates. Does this change Nintendo's production, or in some ways the fact that there's shortages in true Nintendo fashion means that they're going to delay their new model even further, because Nintendo over the course of their time has always opted for cheaper chips, cheaper, the infrastructure in a Nintendo system is usually a little bit dated because it's easier and cheaper to produce.
Yeah, I don't. It's an interesting kind of. I didn't think you were going to go that direction with this topic.
Oh, so what direction were you prepared for? Let's
uh,
let's
I
start with that.
just, you know, is it a problem? But like as far as the next Switch, because I know Game Logic is he pretty much. I don't think we can have a Nintendo discussion without discussing when the next Switch is coming out or whatever the follow-on is called.
Seems about right. Yes, yes.
And so I guess I am a little prepared. But yeah, it probably doesn't affect it either way. Um, I think they're just gonna when they're ready to when they're ready to move forward, they'll probably move forward. Like it's just, Um, they're not going to be
That
moving
that is
forward
the
anytime.
most Nintendo answer.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Yep.
Well,
We will
they're
let you
not
know
gonna.
when there's an announcement to announce.
There's there's no reason why they try to force something now. Like that's like you said, that's never been their bread and butter is to be cutting edge hardware company. And it's just by the very fact that we have chip shortages and whatever, they're probably going to be skittish about trying to do anything that's hardware related and be reliant. Like, I'm sure they don't want to be in a position that Sony and Microsoft are in where it's over a year now and people are still like scrambling and fighting scalpers and everything. It's just um, and dealing with making sure that the hardware supply meets them. Like it, on the one hand, it's a good problem to have that people want your stuff, but on the other hand, do they really need? Are they concerned about getting hardware out to just get hardware out? If they can keep churning along, I think they'll churn along. If it pushes out another, maybe the answer is yeah. If it pushes it out another year, okay. It pushes it out another year or two.
Well, yeah, I think that's probably the Nintendo answer, right? Like if they continue to sell, there's no there's no timeline that they need to try to match for the sake of technology. Like they're going to base this based on previous experience and history. They're going to base this on how their sales are going, not necessarily on how the technology is going.
Hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a good way, a succinct way to put it. And I don't see any reason why the sales would slow down. Like the only reason why I feel like Nintendo would even care about the hardware is if people really start clamoring for a 4K solution. Um, but the scaling from SD to HD and from HD to 4K, like I feel like when I hooked my Wii or something like that up to the like an HD TV, it's noticeably poor.
Mm, yes, I think that is
and
accurate. Yeah.
but I have a 4K TV and with my like having an HD switch on it, it doesn't degrade the experience, I don't think. I'm not looking at it and being like, wow, this is you know, they cut a lot of corners here with the resolution and the resolution covered up, papered over a lot of graphical um, issues. It's like when it's once it gets to that like HD resolution, jump into 4K, like the scaling on your TV and everything, it's not. I don't think it's something that's going to be a huge driver either. So
Okay. Sounds good. Well, before I we could stay on this topic for plenty of time, and as we
yeah,
in true E2KG fashion, we certainly could always talk about Nintendo. But let's move on and talk about another NFTs and EA. So, Swiss, you've got this story here in terms of EA and NFTs.
yeah. So PC Gamer, EA calls NFT and blockchain games quote the future of our industry, and I I saw this headline. I did not find this article, but I saw the headline. It got me upset. It was just like, wow, that's like the most EA corpo whatever speak that you can you can. It's just yep. Okay, coming from EA, not a surprise. So like, um, he says he's like, it's the future of our industry, but added, it's still early to figure out how that's going to work. So it's, I don't know. It just feels like another like buzzword thing that people are going to, investors might feel like it's something that they might be into, but as far as like the gaming perspective, okay, does do NFTs actually add to gaming as art? And so like what's an NFT? It's those non-fungible tokens. So basically there's a way like cryptographically that uniquely identify a digital asset. So when I say uniquely identify, if there is one super hammer that's in Fortnite, that is the only super hammer. It has like a unique code in it or something. So it can be traded and moved around from person to person. You can have that ownership of like a digital asset in a way that it can't be like copied and duplicated. So it's just like,
I'm just impressed that you're taking us down this path of trying to explain NFTs to. So that's great.
well,
Yes.
it okay, so that's what they're dealing with here. We can uniquely not timestamp, but uniquely stamp these digital assets and let our players um, trade and interact with
Right.
them.
There's only 10 of these made. There's only 100 of these made.
Right.
Yep. Hmm.
And let's map that back now and see how that is the future of gaming. So it might be the future of like whales, like your Candy Crush or whoever.
Right. It's the future of microtransactions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I'll grant you that in a world where we have uh, Star Citizen, which we haven't ranted about in a while, selling like ships for $100 and $1,000 a pop. Like this is like right up their alley. Okay, this is the only Millennium Falcon in the universe. And you have to have the NFT to prove it. So it produces rarity and whatever. And there are people that would be into that. But as far as the future of gaming, no, not at all. Like this adds nothing to the experience of playing an adventure game or compete. Just it's a very narrow focus on this segment of the Fortnite, Call of Duty people that care about skins type. And I don't feel like that's emblematic of the gaming community or even their desires like in total. But I guess it moves the needle in a stock
Yes. Right. I think this
quarterly
is an
report.
investor
Yeah.
buzzword type of thing. Yeah, exactly. I agree. I agree. Well, let's move on to another investor buzzword, which is CEO. And Bobby Kotick, who took a significant bonus last year thanks to his board and the performance of Activision Blizzard King, uh, now has announced that due to all of the lawsuits and all the other pending litigation and sexual harassment and other challenges that Activision Blizzard is facing right now, that Bobby Kotick will he's going to take the minimum salary, which is 62,500 per year. Now, granted, I mean, I think that this is actually a good step. I think that the last time that we heard about Bobby Kotick's salary was when there was a $155 million package that was paid out to him in stock dividends and other things based on a bonus. So the fact that he's jumping from down to 62,000, but I can't get too excited about this from like a congratulations, corporate America, because we don't necessarily know about the stock options. But I do think that this is a big step forward in terms of the leadership of Activision Blizzard acknowledging kind of the severity of the problems. That the last time we heard from Bobby Kotick was a letter back in the spring, the summertime when this was starting to break. So the summer when he was saying like the state of California overstepped, and then a week later he kind of walked that back and said we support the studios and the workers here. So this is actually a good kind of mea culpa. I see this as at least constructive of Activision Blizzard being aware at a corporate level, at a board level, of the severity of the problems that they're facing. And before we toss it over to you, Swiss, I also want to throw in the other story, which is the fact that one of the other Blizzard news stories of the week is that the co-lead of Blizzard, Jen O'Neill, who was co-leading it with Mikey Barra, who Jen O'Neill started a few months ago. She was previously head of Vicarious Visions, that she is stepping down as kind of co-lead of Blizzard. So while we do have some positive news in terms of Bobby Kotick and the CEO recognizing the severity, we're still seeing some ramifications and some turnover at Blizzard. And Jen O'Neill is very specific, or at least in her press release around this, she's very specific that she's leaving not because she is without hope for Blizzard. She's, quote, "I'm inspired by the passion of everyone here, working towards meaningful, lasting change with their whole hearts," but that she is going on to do other things. So whether another opportunity came up, we don't necessarily know where she's going, and I'm sure we'll probably hear about that. But at the same time, regardless of why somebody leaves, it becomes a leadership vacuum. It becomes a consistency and institutional knowledge piece. And maybe that's a good thing when your institution has had the challenging, kind of harassing culture that Blizzard seems to have had from allegations. But this is a series of just one more, right? We've had a number of other Blizzard execs leave, leads on different projects, whether it's Overwatch, Blizzard, or Diablo 4. We've had a variety of changeover in leadership here. So, since this is our weekly legal stint, Swiss, do you have any thoughts here on Activision Blizzard?
Just real quick on this about Kodak. It just that just it feels very like public relationsy to me. So like it's just so I'm not gonna get too excited about that. I'm not opposed to like a CEO making a lot of money because like a good CEO will be of tremendous value to a company. The problem is like there's a lot that aren't so good but still making a lot of money. But um, uh, with Kotick, it's just this. Oh, it's only going to be 62.5. I'm curious where that number fell. If that's like the median something. Just I'm kind of curious where the 62.5 figure came from, and I'm sure it's been marketing tested. But
Really? With Activision Blizzard?
yes.
Marketing tested?
So I'm a little cynical about that. But the more interesting story to me is uh, the departure of Jen O'Neill. So and and she started after all of this hit the news, or
She
slightly.
started it in the co-lead role um, after all this hit the news. She was a studio head at Vicarious Visions.
That was EA took them over though, right?
No,
No, that or am I
Activision.
thinking of
I mean, Vicarious
Visceral?
Visions. You're thinking of, yes, you're
Oh,
thinking of
sorry.
Visceral.
Okay.
Yep, Vicarious Visions. They were at one point they were the alternate years on Skylanders with Toys for Bob. They did the remaster of Tony Hawk, and they most
Okay.
recently did the remaster of Diablo 2. And the most recent news about Vicarious Visions is that they've been absorbed into Blizzard and they're no longer going to be going by Vicarious Visions, but will just be a Blizzard studio.
Okay. So she was more on the Activision side. Um, yeah, so this I guess that changes it a little bit. I felt for some reason I felt like she wasn't would have been an outsider voice in the company, uh, but I was mistaken about where she was landing. So um, yeah, I think in that case, I think it's just like a lot of the others. You see the writing on the wall, and if another opportunity comes, it's um, you know at some point you have to make the decision what's best for you, yourself and your family, and there you can take it or leave it.
Yeah, no, right? I mean, I don't know that anybody can blame anybody who is looking for other opportunities at Activision Blizzard. So, well, let's jump the order here, Swiss. And for the sake of a segue, let's jump into the other Activision Blizzard news, which is the delay of some games.
Yes. So two of I would say like two of Blizzard's biggest properties, Diablo and Overwatch. Um,
The only two really in their pipeline at this point as well that we know about.
right. Diablo 4 and Overwatch 2, they've both been announced to be delayed. So in a statement on they posted, so we've worked with our new leadership in Blizzard and within the franchises themselves, particularly in certain key creative roles. It has become apparent that some of the Blizzard content planned for next year will benefit from more development time to reach its full potential. While we are still planning to deliver a substantial amount of content from Blizzard next year, we are now planning for a later launch for Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4 than originally envisaged. Now, I think what makes this more interesting is that they haven't, like in a ZGM notes, they didn't even have dates yet, which means they
Right?
couldn't have
Like
been very imminent.
later than 2022, which is the only window they've provided.
Yeah. So it's going to be a while. Diablo 4, I'm actually not like terribly surprised. Like if you have, one of these, you're like, I mean, arguably that's their top IP, right? So you want to make when you're doing a major sequel to one of your top, like to your top IP, you take time. Uh, I know people would say World of
Sure,
Warcraft.
right? I
People would
mean,
argue with me,
yeah, I would think that the
but
bottom line would probably say that World of Warcraft still is probably the top IP. But yeah, I mean Diablo and WoW and Warcraft are the two long-term franchises.
hmm so I never expected that to be short term anyway. Um, okay, so that's going to be a while. But Overwatch 2, they announced that years ago now. And when
It's
they
been at
did,
least 2
it's
years?
got to be at least two. And then when they did announce it, it was like some sort of a hybrid of Overwatch like DLC pack on
Yep. Everybody's going to be
supercharged.
able to come in and you can still play, if you own the original game, you're still going to be able to be populated in. Yep.
So that to me is much more curious. And you know, as you could say that perhaps the turmoil has had an effect on their development pipelines now. But it's I think that's the bigger one. But the other thing EGM notes, like they haven't, the last new character, like even Overwatch itself hasn't really been updated much, and it's been April of 2020 since they added a character to the roster. So um, interesting.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't realize that it had been that long.
I I guess that maybe like with COVID too. Like I don't know. It just feels given when they announced it and what the scope seemed to be, it just feels like this one might be a red flag. Diablo 4 is not to me. This one is. But
Well, and I think as we mentioned before, right? We've already seen that Overwatch has had multiple big kind of creative lead departures.
mhm.
And so that may also be impacting this as well. Yeah. But so what I'm curious about, and the reason I stammer is that the Overwatch League and the kind of esports area here has announced that this last season of Overwatch League was going to be their last before they move on. So whether or not they extend this, what changes, Whether or not people care is a whole different thing. But um, I do think, I mean, again, in the long run, this is probably a good thing. In the short run, it does create a lot of instability and a lot of question marks around anything coming out of Blizzard. All right. Well, let's move on to games that are coming out of other studios. So we got a couple other game releases and announcements here this week. We have the announcement from uh, Rock Paper Shotgun in terms of Amy Hennig working on chairing and leading a new studio that is making a Marvel game. We don't know what the Marvel game has been. There's been a couple rumors out there. I saw a couple around Fantastic Four, but no announcement. Basically, just that they are making a Marvel game. So, Amy Hennig, if you remember, was the Uncharted kind of lead creative director there of the original. And by the time that that series ran its course, she had moved over to EA and was working on a narrative based Star Wars game, which was canceled in pre-production at some point, and we don't know all the details about what that game would have been. And now she is taking on another big franchise here, a big franchise by Disney as well, in terms of working on a new Marvel game. But again, I think in some ways, it's hard to get excited about this because we don't know what it is. But the pedigree is good, right? I think Amy Hennig has told good stories in the first few Uncharted's. That she's creating a new studio with not necessarily with the EA oversight and the cancellations that we know about around their Star Wars projects. So maybe we'll see something coming together. But the fact that this is an announcement at this point also means that this game is probably further away than Insomnia's Wolverine, which is already further away than Diablo 4 and Overwatch 2. So it's good to get it out there in terms of some excitement, or to know that some of the people that people follow within the industry have found new homes and are making projects. But I don't know that this is a game yet. Swiss, any thoughts here? Any excitement? Any hesitation?
I have thoughts. So, yes, she is very super talented. Uncharted was great. One of the things that made Uncharted great was that it was its own creative entity. And how many like companies are gonna get opportunities to just like make another Marvel game? Like at some point, when does Marvel get oversaturated? And that might not mean that this is like a purely video game question. It could also it's like a pretty much entertainment question. But like some of the quotes in here are they talk about lends it there was something in here about like setting the bar for narrative adventure games, and just things like that. There was a lot of talk about like Amy Hennig, she's this is what she's great at, and we're excited to bring her in. And it's like, then let her do what she's done and have like her like tell her own stories, and like let the like Guerrilla Games, when they were just like, we don't care anymore, we're just gonna do something cool. Like, then we got um, Horizon Zero Dawn, and it's just like, I don't know. I'd be more excited if it was like, I'm working on this really super cool new IP. We can't announce it yet, but it's gonna be awesome. And they'd be like, ooh, intrigue. And now it's like, oh wait, we get another Marvel game. Okay.
I mean, my hope is that it is not a franchise that we've already visited, right? Like, if it is a franchise that hasn't been seen a whole lot in movies or in games, that there is the potential to take some exploration, right? I think that Fantastic Four could actually work. I think in some ways a combat heavy, combo heavy Daredevil could be really interesting. You know, the action adventure kind of platform exploration aspects that Amy Hennig's games have brought, or even the Star Wars games seem to be leaning in, would be, it's kind of difficult to think of a Marvel comic that leans in that kind of adventure-y way, but you certainly could, you could put together some avenues of a Doctor Strange, or even, the challenge is that it has to be big enough to carry over from a Disney perspective, right? That it needs to be a big enough property to carry over some type of audience and not just be a deep cut within the Marvel. You know, this is not an exploration in the savage lands of with I'm trying to think of who the loincloth wearing uh person is, right? My X-Men cartoon from the 1990s is escaping me here. But um but yeah, I think that in some ways you end up getting kind of narratively boxed in by whatever franchise you end up with.
And you just get like, while EA might not be hovering over you, I mean, it's not like Disney is a light yoke either. So
That is very true. Very true. All right. Well, speaking of yokes and a long haul and a burden to carry, let's turn to Sakurai and Super Smash Brothers. Swiss, you've got a news story here from Eurogamer.
indeed, and now I can't find my link. Okay, but uh, so I guess Sakurai, he's been doing stories in Famitsu every other week or something. He has a column or something. So I guess they were,
Yeah, he's had a column for quite
yeah,
a number of years. Yep.
so um, I guess this last column, he's gonna stop doing it now. That Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is complete with the addition of Sora. Uh, he had some kind of retrospective thoughts and some thoughts on the future of the franchise. And so he wrote, I'm not thinking about a sequel, but I can't say that this is definitely the last Smash Brothers. I cannot say that this is definitely the last Smash Brothers. I need to think about whether we should release another Smash Brothers game at the risk of disappointing the users. But then he said, I can't see any way to produce Smash Brothers without me. To be honest, I'd like to leave it to someone else, and I've actually tried that, but it hasn't worked out. If we're going to continue with the series, Nintendo and I need to discuss and seriously consider how to make it a success. So, um, I don't know. I'm wondering if something got lost in translation or what, but it just doesn't come across as the most humble statement. Um, but you know, Smash Brothers is a unique property, and there's a lot of licensing headaches, obviously. But is it really like my thought was like when it said like the headline Sakurai unsure if Smash Brothers can continue without him. Of course it can continue without you. Like it can continue without you. So
Well, but I think we say that from a Western perspective. I mean, I think that if we look at Nintendo culture, that how long has Miyamoto been around in terms of, yes, now he's not actively, now he's executive producing, now he's a creative designer, right? Like, but that lineage, that kind of heritage of design, of experience that is within Japanese game culture, I could see where this comes from. Like, how does somebody create something without the father of it? How do they do that in such a way that it continues to be what it was before? That, yes, you're exactly right. Like, as an IP, as a franchise, as a corporate entity, of course it's going to keep going. Like, there is too much money involved for it to stop. But what it becomes next will be an interesting piece. And I think in some ways this ties back to our first story, right? Like, if we're not getting a new Nintendo console, there's no rush for a new Smash to exist yet, right? Like Sakurai has talked about after the last Smash Brothers, he talked about burnout and people were surprised when Smash Ultimate came out because he was talking about burnout after the Smash on the Wii U. So, but if we're also delayed in a Nintendo console, this is one of those long tails. It's may not quite have the same sales as Mario Kart 8, which has now surpassed Mario Kart Wii in terms of sales, but it is still going to be one of those perennial sellers.
Yeah, you're gonna have a Switch. You're probably gonna pick up Smash. Um, you know, I the thing is, it's like, how can Smash continue without me? They're not gonna have to reinvent the wheel. In other words, like you talk about lineage, there's a team there, and you know, I understand people that are like artistic, you know, they have control, but in some ways you can pull back. Like Miyamoto pulled back, and yeah, he might. I mean, he still has an influence at the company, but he let others kind of take up the torch and add to it. And so even over time with Mario, it's still Mario throughout. So that lineage exists, but there's been creative infusion, and each game is different. Um, so uh, Smash, it's kind of hard to like have more variance other than adding more characters, which they did that this time, and like I don't know, it's hard to decide where you're going to go from here. Like I don't feel like the Smash Brothers property is going to fall apart without him, um, because he's done a good job and he's set the template. And
I think that's a really good point, right?
yeah,
Like the template is there. The framework of what makes a platform battler is
right.
there. It has been picked up by a variety of other games.
And I don't want to like sound like Sakurai, he had no like role in it. Like by creating the template, like that's why it can continue. Like because he did a good job, that's why it can continue. Um, the more interesting question for me is, how does Smash Brothers continue in a fresh manner? Like it's the same game it's been. There's very little that they can.
Well,
That,
right. I think that's Mario Kart as well, right? I think it becomes it's a new it's the same game on a new platform with new technology. Whether or not it drastically changes in terms of the type of game it is, it's more about the platform and the technology. So let's jump back in time with some technology and with the Nintendo Online Expansion Pass launch, we've had few weeks of some complaints in terms of the emulation. So I'm going to kick this over to you, Swiss, and I will join you back in a minute.
so we got issues with when the expansion pack released. Um, Immediately reports started surfacing online that the emulator wasn't quite up to par. Um, so like you see screenshots of the like this Kotaku story has like the water temple for the N64, the Wii U Virtual Console, and the game, and like it doesn't look quite as nice on the Switch, which is surprising. Um, there's been issues where Link running around Kakariko Village at the beginning of the game just starts to grind in the frame rate, and it's not just Zelda. I saw some kind of goofy pictures from screenshots from Super Mario 64, and it feels very rushed.
Well, I think from reading this, like the emulator that they're using has a known issue with fog, with some of the mist effects, which definitely come into play in Zelda for sure. Yeah.
So it's it's just it's if they were just like throwing this on to like the online, like people would be like, whatever, it's free. But when you more than double the price,
Right? I think that's
that's
right,
what's
exactly.
really
Like when
annoying
you jump
people.
the price $40 or $30,
There's an
and then you
expectation.
have low quality emulation. Yeah, I think you're right. There is an expectation that I'm paying for this good and it should perform at the level that my nostalgia remembers it at.
Right. My nostalgia. Um, then you got like the button issues because the N64 controller doesn't like map the same way on like the Switch, which I confess I didn't really think too much about when I heard the news. Mostly because like they've already ported like Ocarina to like the GameCube, which has a much more Switchish configuration. So
Well,
just
they also ported Ocarina to
the
3DS,
3DS, yeah.
which is very Switch-like in terms of its orientation.
Um, but there are some games that this doesn't work very well with, and that's been a problem. But then again, Nintendo's solution is just buy the N64 controller for 49.99 or whatever it happens to be. But I saw the article also has like a tweet about Star Fox 64, and the buttons just like don't work well, but you can't remap them either. Like there's no option
Yeah,
for
I read
that.
about the remapping or the lack thereof.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
just another case of like just get it out there and you know, there'll be these issues, but so what? Again, for a free service, perhaps acceptable, but for the cost, it's just, so
Yeah, it really does feel rushed. I agree.
it just bothers me a little bit because like I mean I got my N64 shirt, sweater on and everything, but it's in some ways Nintendo is so awesome, and in other ways it's just they're so facepalm.
It's so true, right? Nintendo's gonna Nintendo. So, I mean, it does sound like the Genesis emulation is pretty solid, but it really gets into the 3D emulation on the 64 and the change in controller. But hopefully the fact that it is continuing to make some news, continuing to gain some headlines means that they'll pay a little bit of attention and try to address this with some patches as well. One of the patches that did come out, though, did you see this today? That they patched the Super Mario 3D All Stars so that you can play Mario 64 with the newly released N64 controller. So the game that was a limited release from last year, which you can still find on Target shelves and other places, of Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, and Galaxy 1 has now been patched so that you can play Mario 64 with the newly released $50 N64 controller, which in some ways is actually really nice, unnecessary, really nice. But also feels like if they're patching that and not focusing on the news story that we just talked about in terms of their emulation, it seems like, yeah,
Yeah.
that they are like, yes, we're giving you more reasons to buy this $50 controller, but not necessarily fixing the ones that you're going to play with this $50 controller.
It's I had not heard that, but on the other hand, like I don't know, it makes the controller it makes it a
Oh
little
yeah,
you
no,
could
I
like
I
justify it a little bit more now. So
yes, right. I do not want to complain about it because the more that they implement the controller, the more value it has.
yeah. So now do
Yep.
you I I have like a little USB thing so I can hook my GameCube controllers up to my Switch. Um so uh
Oh, that's nice. Like
when
you
they
can
were
hook up a Wavebird.
uh I'm sorry.
You can hook up a Wavebird
I
or
guess in theory, mine it's like it just has like four ports on it, and I can just use my old. I still use my original GameCube
oh, okay. So you're
controller.
just plugging it in. Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
I'm I'm thinking, whenever the GameCube emulation comes out, they're not going to need it. I'm not going to need to spend $50 because I'll already have it.
Well, as we talked about at the top of the show, since the Switches continue to be supply chained, constrained, that I would be surprised if I guess it's possible, right? Like if they're going to delay the release of a new Switch, that putting out GameCube games gives them something else to continue to a revenue stream.
Yeah.
But it also could be very Nintendo-like to hold off on the GameCube to the next console in order for the next console to feel like it's special because it got a new retro port to it.
I would. It took this long for the N64 ports, and we saw how much effort they put into that. So I don't think GameCube is probably on their radar.
I think that is fair. I think that is fair. Any other thoughts or news stories from the week, Swiss?
Nope. I think we can wrap it up.
All right. Well, let's jump into. So, again, as we talked about at the top of the show on the E2KG network here on Enough to Keep Going, we give ourselves a gaming assignment. As grown-ups who game, we like to give ourselves some homework. And so, our Picks Plays assignment for next week deals with horde modes. So that whether you're in Doom or in Gears of War, that there are a variety of types of horde modes so that we're going to be challenging ourselves. We're giving ourselves the assignment here of things that are stylistically similar to horde modes or an endless runner, something that is a wave based and nonstop until you fail. So we're going to take on any game mode of this kind that, is the whole single camera shot, that it's going to keep on going until you die. Horde modes, endless runners, tower defense, anything that is start to finish without loading screens or pauses. So in true E2KG fashion, we've given ourselves lots of leeway here to pick some games. I think actually the game that I'm going to talk about if I'm on the show next week is a new game that was released this week, which is Tunche, Tunche, by Leap Studios. It's a brawler, but it's a rogue light brawler, and so you're moving through board by board in kind of a standard kind of 2D beat 'em up until you can no longer until you die, and then you start the run over again. And so in some ways this is the horde mode. They're throwing waves and waves of things at me. This is set in the Peruvian jungle based around some Peruvian myths. It's a very fluid 2D brawler, but it's been a lot of fun to kind of play with, but not only single player, but also with my kids as well, because it is up to 4 players in true kind of 1990s arcade beat 'em up fashion. So Swiss, any thoughts about what you're playing in this horde mode endless runner kind of wave based attack?
No, I haven't picked anything yet. I'd probably try to find something small in multiplayer, but we'll see.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Well, next week on the 11th of November will be our GX show. This will be episode 218, and we'll be talking about all the games that we've been playing, not only the assignment that we just talked about, but what else we've been playing, new releases, backlog things. Game Logic is here to host us, and ideally it's going to be all of us here around the microphone, gathering around, getting ready to segue into the holiday season as Thanksgiving and the holidays start to come up. We've got lots to talk about and lots of games to talk about. So any other final thoughts, Swiss, before we head out for the night? All right. Well, thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for listening. Thank you for viewing. Thank you for picking this up and following along, regardless of when you're watching and listening. For myself, DBqhams, and for SwissGuard, this has been Enough to Keep Going on the E2KG network. Thank you for joining us. And until next time, play the games you love those you play with, and take care of yourself. Good night.